The summer of 2016 experienced one of the largest popular culture trends of the decade. In cities all across the nation, people are out and about, flooding local parks, restaurants, and streets. The strangest part? They were all on their phones, playing the same game. That game was called Pokemon Go, or Pogo for short. It was an augmented reality mobile app that forced players to move in the real world in order to move in the game and catch Pokemon. Unfortunately, shortly after its explosive popularity, the game lost most of its user base. This pattern is consistent with the typical Gartner hype cycle of video games. However, Pokemon Go's fall-off was quicker than usual for several reasons. First, the game's developers did not expect such a massive amount of people to play. During the initial hype phase, when it seemed like half of the world was playing, the game's servers were constantly down. Niantic, the developers of the game, had not anticipated the amount of traffic, and so they did not get enough server space. This caused a disconnect, because the game was actually unplayable for about half of the time. The servers and other issues with the game's design, such as the tracking system that made it difficult to track down Pokemon, contributed to the rapid decline of Pokemon Go's popularity. Thankfully for Pokemon Go, they fixed many of their problems over time. With constant updates to the game, including releasing several new generations of Pokemon, and holding many different community events, the strong development of the game has led to a revival in the number of players. It is nothing close to their previous player base, but they proved that their game was not just a flash in the pan. Many of the new features that Niantic added to the game center around strengthening the Pokemon Go community through player interaction. Examples include the new friending system, where players can exchange gifts, the trading system, where players can exchange Pokemon, and the raiding events, where players can collaborate to defeat a boss Pokemon. I have played Pokemon Go since its initial release, but there was a time about a month after the game first launched that I began to play less and less. With the recent updates, I have returned to the game, and noticed several interesting things about the current player base and community events. I decided to create this ethnography, which is a study of how a group of people acts, to delve deeper into my observations. Through my interviews with different Pokemon Go players, my participation in community events, and the phenomena I have noticed, it became clear to me that there was a unique dynamic created by the ages of players. In this ethnography, I will explore how age impacts players' ability, experience, and motivation to play Pokemon Go, and what roles it plays in community-centered aspects of the game. Based upon my observations, the primary age group of Pokemon Go players consists of millennials. These were the people who grew up with Pokemon games and the trading card game when they were kids. When I asked several millennial players about why they played Pokemon Go, a common motivation was nostalgia.
So, why do you play Pokemon Go?
Nostalgia. Since I was a kid playing Pokemon, and still hits that nerve inside when you see like something from your childhood and it reminds you of happiness, you know? So that's kind of why I still play it now.
A popular Pokemon Go YouTuber, Trainer Tips, who is also a millennial, shares similar motivations to play.
I like Stunky also. I did use Stunky and Skuntank on my first playthrough of Diamond version, back when Gen 4 first released, so kind of a nostalgic Pokemon for me.
Reliving past glory is not the only reason why so many millennials play Pokemon Go. Some also use the game as a way to spend time with family and significant others. For example, they might use Pokemon Go as an encouragement to go out to the park together.
I got back into it because a friend told me about it, and he said that it got better since 2016 when I stopped playing because the game was garbage then. And then it's something for my wife and I to do while we're walking the dogs through a park.
Okay.
Yep, that's actually one of our reasons. My girlfriend and I will walk the dog and play Pogo, so it's been a lot of fun.
The game can also be used as a way to bring entire families together. During the monthly Community Day events, there's a 3-hour time window with in-game advantages that encourages players to get out and play together. I often went to Westside Park during these events, and every time I saw several families playing. It seemed that parents would bring their kids along and give them devices to play on so that the entire family could have a fun bonding experience. Although many little kids were playing Pokemon Go, a lot of them were also just running around and enjoying themselves without electronics. Parents would often even dress them up in cute Pokemon-related costumes when they went. Thus, the game is often used to help bring families, friends, and couples together. However, it does not have all positive effects. The main issue with the design of Pokemon Go is that it creates discrepancies of gameplay based on material resources. Players with cars do not have to spend ages walking to the place of the best Pokemon, or to track down an individual Pokemon they want to catch. Some players have tried to get around this by spoofing, or faking their location, but that has been banned. Also, players with larger screens and faster phones have an inherent advantage in the game. And there are many items and other things you can buy with real money to assist your gameplay. So, there are a lot of monetary aspects that facilitate success in the game. An example of how these advantages can manifest themselves comes in this anecdote. I got a special invitation through the game to do a raid for a rare Pokemon, Mewtwo, with a specific location, date, and time arranged. Unfortunately, my parents were out of town that weekend, and I could not get a ride to the park. Even though the rendezvous point was about a 20-minute drive from my house, I decided to ride my bike over. However, it had a flat tire, which actually came completely off when I was about a mile away from the park. At that point, I was running out of time left in the event, and so I had to run over while awkwardly dragging and carrying my bike. Thankfully, I barely made it on time, but the whole affair could have been avoided and simplified if I were old enough and had the resources to own my own car. One group that has access to these real-world advantages, the people who likely have the most time on their hands, who are old enough to be working jobs, who can drive a car, who have autonomy, and who have significant others to play the game with, are millennials. The advantages afforded to them by age, and their separate motivations to play the game, are why I believe millennials dominate the Pokemon Go scene. Indeed, their experience playing the game is much more positive than people from other age groups with their resources or backgrounds. The age composition of Pokemon Go's player population also plays an interesting role in the community-centered aspects of the game. As I mentioned before, there were several recent updates to the game that focused on supporting interaction and collaboration between members of the Pokemon Go community. The first one I want to talk about is raiding. A raid is essentially an event where players can work together to challenge a strong Pokemon, and, if they defeat it, try to catch it. While some bosses are easy to do alone, most of them require the help of other people. One day, Niantic held an event in Pokemon Go similar to a community day, but with raids. There was one select Pokemon, Moltres, that was offered in a raid in every gym during a certain 3-hour time slot. That day, I went out with 3 of my friends to play on the University of Illinois campus. Not surprisingly, due to the area in which we were playing, the only other people playing were college students. When we went to our first raid, there was a group of random players who had gotten together to defeat the Pokemon. We joined them in the battle, and continued to raid several more gyms as a group. Although the group generally had a very positive and inclusive vibe, not many words were exchanged. My friends and I would talk to each other, and other pre-formed friend groups would talk, but discourse in between the subgroups was less common. People who didn't have any friends with them usually just stayed quiet. I think part of this was because we were strangers to each other, but I think there were also elements caused by age. I think that the millennials in college were more in their own social bubble, and less likely to make attempts to socialize, as opposed to how younger kids or older adults might. Another phenomenon I noticed at raids was the overt respect players paid toward other more experienced players. For example, it is a common tradition to get help from other people to catch the raid Pokemon after you defeat it. During my first major raid for the Mewtwo, I was really nervous that I would not catch it, and so I handed my phone over to another player who had evidently done the raid many times before. He used an advanced throwing method and caught the Mewtwo for me. He was also a millennial. At another Mewtwo raid I went to, with a lot of my friends this time, there was another player who we all recognized as a veteran. After we beat the boss, my friends gathered around him, and, one by one, gave him their phones. The act of handing over your phone, one of your most personal devices, is something that rarely happens, especially to absolute strangers. Something special to Pokemon Go is that it helps create these bonds. Unfortunately, it is usually only millennials who have the unique privilege to help catch Pokemon for others, and who have achieved such a status in the community. In all of my time playing and raiding, I've never seen a teenager be handed a phone by someone older than them so that they can catch a Pokemon. It is even rare to see an older adult be looked up to in the same way. As we have seen, age plays a prominent role in influencing players' ability, experience, and motivation to play the game. Older adults grew up with other Pokemon games and have access to other advantages and privileges, such as cars, money, and status, things that teenagers and older adults do not all have. It also impacts the community-centered aspects of the game, which seem to excel with teenagers and especially adults and their families, but to fall short with millennials. In this final section, I will discuss these issues more in depth, as I cover the limitations of the game and of my ethnography. The main limitation of Pokemon Go is that it fails to completely unify its community. It is successful in getting players out and about, but not really in bonding them. While players are friendly to one another, there is no motivation to actually become close friends. As I have mentioned, when I played, I usually saw pre-formed friend groups sticking together and not venturing out of their social comfort zone. So, while I think that Pokemon Go is more successful in creating meaningful relationships between veteran players who spend most of their time playing, for the vast majority of players, I think a close community is not fostered. An example of this can be found in one of the trades I did. I messaged the Pokemon Go Discord saying that I wanted to trade for something particular, and a person responded. We worked out the details and planned a location and time to meet up for the trade. Note how the game forces the two people trading to actually physically move together, which is encouraging social bonding. However, when I met the guy, it was all business. We just exchanged a few words, quickly traded, and then went our separate ways. There was no reason to do otherwise, because we were two drastically different people going to different schools and would likely never see each other again. Finally, I would like to recognize the limitations of my ethnography and how they may have influenced my observations. First of all, I am a teenager. There are not many other teenage players around, and thus, my experience playing the game most likely varies quite a bit from the average millennial player. Second, I need to acknowledge that most of my time playing was on the University of Illinois campus or at Westside Park. Since the university is comprised of millennial-aged students, I may have made general assumptions about the age group based on skewed experiences. Further, the demographics of players at Westside Park may vary from in other places, especially more rural locations. With all of this in mind, I believe that my ethnography in Pokemon Go was quite effective in highlighting the different phenomena and variability in game experience caused by the age of players. Additionally, I discussed how the age distribution manifested itself in the social aspects of the game. Overall, it was quite enjoyable to go out and play the game for this project with a more analytical viewpoint on the game and its community. Hopefully in the future, you the viewer and I will be able to continue viewing not just Pokemon Go, but the other influences in our everyday lives through new, critical lenses.